Greetings, everyone. This is Rock and Roll Spock. We're on installment of Mutant Monday. Today we'll be looking at House of X number 5. So, where we left off in House of X, a team of X-Men consisting of Cyclops, Wolverine, Jean Grey, Nightcrawler, Archangel, Mystique, Husk, and M attacked the Orcus Forge in orbit of the Sun in an effort to not destroy the base, but just to drop the mother mold that the Forge is built around into the Sun and destroy it. And while the strike team succeeded in their mission, they succeeded at the cost of their lives. All eight members of the strike team were killed. So we begin the new issue, with a quote from Professor X. Do you want to know the real difference between them and us? Until now, we were never given a chance. So Polaris and Magneto are talking on Krakoa about humanity. Mainly, Polaris asking if there's any good in humanity. And Magneto replies that society is the one good thing that humans taught mutants. And he goes on to explain that him and Xavier have often wondered what would happen if mutants didn't have to run or hide or be hunted. If the greatest necessary traits weren't strength and aggressiveness, but intelligence, ingenuity, and creativity. Well, apparently now they know. And we're at the Kretch that was shown in House of X number 1. And the 5 show up. The 5 consisting of Hope Summers, Tempest, Proteus, Elixir, and Gold Balls. The whole thing is explained that the golden balls that Gold Balls makes are eggs. They're not viable eggs, but they're eggs. However, they can be made viable through alteration of warping of reality by Proteus. So then, once that's done, then comes the injection of mutant DNA into each one. Okay, you now have a mutant husk. Then Elixir basically gets the cellular replication going. And Tempest basically uses her abilities to speed up time for the egg. Hope, one, is the person that is the one who injects the DNA into the eggs, also utilizes her powers to have everyone else working at their peak, and also to kind of bridge the other 4, so that they're all working together. And then there's the final part, though. That final part is Cerebro. Turns out that Cerebro while initially was created to locate any mutant in the world, well, it turns out that it was doing something else. It would copy the essence, the mind, of any mutant Xavier found. And so Xavier can then use the helmet to transfer that essence back into that mutant's, who that mutant is. The shell, basically the cloned shell of that mutant. And so basically we get an expansion on the scene from the first issue of the eggs hatching and Xavier saying, "To me, my X-Men," to the hatchlings. So we have a very cultish ceremony revering the five and announcing that, the X-Men strike team, yes, they died. But death is not the end for them, as they are back. They have been returned to them. But it turns out that the next day is slated to be the vote by the UN Security Council as to whether or not the UN will recognize the sovereignty of Krakoa. And so they did. But Xavier talks with Emma telepathically, explaining that he's aware that she prodded the Russian ambassador to abstain rather than vote against, as apparently voting against would have basically said, yeah, we don't recognize your sovereignty. And Xavier also explains that he has some very bold things in mind. There's also a write-up on mutant diplomacy, which we'll get to in a little while. Then 2 days later on Krakoa, some other mutants have come to the island, have come to Krakoa to live. Various X-Men villains. Mr. Sinister, Lady Mastermind, M-Plate, Exodus, the Gorgon, Callisto, who looks to be Sebastian Shaw, and Apocalypse, returning to Krakoa for the first time in multiple millennia. They have a rather friendly reunion. He explains he fought a war here before the world had any idea that such a thing as mutants existed. And Magneto says, "Okay, we fought for something as well, and we got it." And he explains that he wants Apocalypse to know that they will not risk losing Krakoa because some of them might not value what's being offered. And Apocalypse explains that for centuries he's fostered war and conflict, all in the hopes of mutant kind finally asserting dominance over this world. And now they finally become what he intended them to be. And thus he is overbrimming with pride. And Apocalypse then quite plainly states that on behalf of the villains who've arrived with him, that they submit to the laws of Krakoa, be what they may, and acknowledge that from this day forward they shall serve a higher purpose than want or need. One people from this day forward. And Xavier here acknowledges this and says, let it be known, let the word spread that Krakoa is for all mutants. And he shakes Apocalypse's hand and says, "Welcome home." And the issue concludes with a quote from Magneto. "If you are us, then be with us. Come home." Okay, so now first off, there's a write-up on the resurrection process, as there's quite a bit of information to take in. So first off, the genetic base. Mr. Sinister has an extensive repository of mutant genetic material that he has carefully assembled in recent years. In it, he has the DNA of almost every known mutant on the planet Earth, carefully constructed with the help of Xavier. These are the biological building blocks of each specific mutant, their physical makeup along with what their power is. Without this, we have nothing. There's a note that the library, which began solely as biological samples, has now been converted to holographic sequencing. And while all current mutant modifications have been limited to optimal aging, it is believed that in the future designer modifications will be possible, such as the various chimeras shown in Powers of 10. Alright, next up we've got the host. In the process of mutant resurrection, the genetic base is introduced into organic matter and a mutant husk is created. And while this is not the essence of who or what any mutant is, it is the essential component that makes mutant resurrection possible. As traditional cloning procedures capable of creating a replicant shell grow in real time, any product of temporal growth is susceptible to change agents or variations. The process of mutant resurrection. We got the five. First off, you have Fabio Medina, gold balls. A mutant capable of producing a limitless amount of unviable biological eggs. Kevin McTaggart, Proteus. A mutant capable of warping reality and transforming an unviable egg into a viable one. Joshua Foley, Elixir. A mutant capable of biologically kickstarting the process of life, initializing cell replication and husk growth. Neva Bell, Tempest. A mutant capable of temporarily maturing a husk to a desired age. Finally, Hope Summers, or just Hope. A mutant capable of enhancing and synergizing the other resurrection mutants' powers to ensure the process or the success of each resurrection. Basically, seeing how they all work together. Now, there's a couple notes. One, while it has not yet been tested, it is believed that upgrades or extensions or stand-ins can be assisted by mutants such as Sync or Mimic. So either A, they're talking about bringing back that, either A, they've already brought back Mimic and Sync, or B, if they were to be brought back, they could be stand-ins. The other note, the Proteus problem, where the powers of Proteus are directly associated with the destruction of his own body, and the direct cause of all psychological, or physiological and psychological deviance over the years, has been solved by always having a backup mutant husk prepared for Proteus to inhabit when he burns out his old one. Depending on the frequency with which he is using his power, Proteus' body normally lasts 1 week, but can last as little as 1 day during periods of excessive power use. Proteus' backup mutant husk is always created from the genetic base of Charles Xavier. Okay. Finally, the mind. A backup of every mutant mind on the planet exists. Once a week, Charles Xavier copies the latest version of every mutant mind to multiple redundant cradles located in several locations across the world. These backups are the essence of each mutant, how they think, how they feel, their memories, their very being. When a mutant husk is ready, Charles Xavier injects this backup of who they are into their husk, and that mutant is then reborn. There's also a note with this saying that there's been no experimentation regarding what happens when you combine a mutant mind with a husk that is not their own. Personally, reading that, I'm seeing the possibility of plot points in the future. Finally, scale. Initially, the resurrection capabilities on Krakoa topped out at around 1,000 mutants a week, or around 200 a day. The current estimated mutant population on Earth is around 100,000 and growing. The depowered populations of mutants on Earth is just under 1 million, and the deceased population of mutants on Earth is over 16 million, primarily from Genosha. At that rate of resurrection, it would take around 300 years to bring back everyone who died, let alone how to address the depowered mutants and any that might die in the interim time period. However, as the resurrection machine has become more unified and better at being what they are and doing what they do, it's estimated that capabilities could possibly reach around 30,000 a week and a full Genoshan resurrection be achieved in 10 years. The complication here is that Xavier would have to download or resurrect 6,000 mines a day, which he is not capable of. By that time, there will need to be a workaround or a team of telepaths trained to properly use Cerebro. Now, there's a note here. Extensive testing has shown that the mutant resurrection machine, the Five, is not operating under duress or fatigue or even massive exertion. It appears that the more they do this, the stronger they become and the easier the process becomes. The experience has been described by all five as incredibly blissful, not in a narcotized way or kind of way, but in a manner more akin to total fulfillment. Additionally, these five mutants appear to have become an inseparable family unit and are almost never apart from one another. Their symbiotic process appears to have extended beyond the union of their powers into the mutants themselves. Some of this could be psychological, as on Krakoa they are universally revered, not as celebrities, something achievable through works, but as cultural paragons, something sacred to be treasured. And then there's the Resurrection Protocol. Currently, mutant resurrection takes around 48 hours, a 12-hour gestational period for the DNA samples to take in an egg, and 30 to 42 hours to mature the egg to its desired maturation. However, because of fears regarding duplication and other general questions of morality, once an actual death has been documented, someone believed to be dead cannot be resurrected until their death has been confirmed or they have been undetectable by Cerebro for 1 month. And there are a couple notes. It is expected that, sooner rather than later, a mutant organization will be tasked with investigating mutant missing persons and suspected deaths and murders so as to confirm when the resurrection process should begin. It is also expected that should force conventions become necessary, their extra special mandate would supersede normal resurrection protocols. This, I would presume, is laying the groundwork for X-Force. Next up, we have mutant diplomacy. So, all current mutant diplomacy and the future security and sovereignty of Krakoa is dependent on relationships with human nations centering on their need for mutant pharmaceuticals and the Krakoan ability to meet them. More than 100 nations have accepted a trade deal with Krakoa, and while negotiations are ongoing with most of the world's remaining nations, some have rejected Krakoan overtures. Nations that have rejected a trade treaty with Krakoa are considered to be naturally adversarial. A list of those nations is as follows, and this is basically by continent. On Asia, there's Iran, which is an ideological rejection, Madripoor, political rejection, and North Korea, again, ideological. Europe, Latveria and Russia, political in both points. South America, Brazil and Venezuela for political reasons, then Santo Marco and Terra Verde for ideological reasons. Central America, Honduras for political reasons. And finally, Africa, Wakanda, who does not need mutant drugs, and then also Tanzania, Canaan, and Kenya, which are all Wakandan economic protectorates. And so therefore they are under the the economic umbrella of Wakanda, and thus don't need mutant pharmaceuticals. Presumably, that would any form of treaty between Wakanda and Krakoa more than likely be based along mutual defense of one another, and the fact that the king of Wakanda is at the very least on good terms with more than a few of the X-Men, including Xavier, and is also on amicable terms with his ex-wife, the now former queen of Wakanda, Storm. At least last I checked, they had split up. So that's House of X number 5. We got 3 more issues before the whole story is finished. This coming week we'll see release of Powers of 10 #5, and then we've got just issue 6 of both House of X, then Powers of 10, and then we'll begin with Dawn of X story, with basically the new status quo for the X Men. Fully exploring the new status quo for the X Men. Um, as always, well, that's all for now. As always, feel free to like, share, and subscribe. Links to my Facebook, Twitter, Patreon, and PayPal can be found in the search box down below. This is Rock and Roll Spock signing off, saying, live long and rock hard.